Well, good morning, everyone from California, and welcome to The Wisdom of the Soul. My name is Michael Benner. This is class 32, and today we're going to talk about critical thinking. This is a very important topic for people who want to develop themselves not only personally but spiritually. As I mentioned in the newsletter this week, one of the primary distinctions between organized religion and philosophy is a concept that dances around faith versus science or faith versus fact. Um, and while there's truth in both, it can be confusing because many of us, perhaps most of our friends and neighbors, have a hard time distinguishing the difference between a thought and a feeling. So conspiracy theories are well, they've always been popular, but now more than ever, I think largely because everyone has access to the internet, so it's become a great equalizer. It used to be you didn't have access to the media unless you were a high credible source. If you were an official, excuse me, some sort of official, spokesperson, an authority, an expert, a newsmaker, then you might get your name in the paper along with a quote or on TV or radio, or maybe write a book or an article in a magazine of some sort. But with the internet, everybody gets an opinion. Everybody gets to post it out there. But along the way, what we've forgotten is now there's a new need for us not only to distinguish the difference between thoughts and feelings and what's what, because opinions are very emotionally based. But how can we sort fact from opinion? And how can we, even more importantly, rise above our own biases and prejudices and worldviews? And this is an important part of any personal development or transpersonal spiritual development. Debate's important. In most Buddhist traditions, debate is encouraged. Monks and nuns are taught to debate, to argue logically, and to do it with a great reverence for the whole process. There's no name calling, there's no anger, there's no frustration. It's I accept your premise or I reject your premise, and it's a very formal and dignified debate about spiritual issues and the nature of reality and so on. So critical thinking is very important in all aspects of life, but even if we're here in this class, the nature of the soul, or the wisdom of the soul, rather, um, perhaps the same thing. Uh, I used to teach a class called Nature of the Soul by Lucille Cederkranz. This is the wisdom of the soul. But in any event, let's study critical thinking just a little bit today. It's not going to be pithy. It's not going to be hard. I think you're going to really like it. And I've got well, it's not a handout because I didn't put it in the newsletter for you to download, but I will if you'd like. Maybe that'd be a good idea. I'll add it next week. But you can always take a few notes. There's just some bullet points here that you may want to jot down. So be prepared if you aren't already with something to write on and a pen or a pencil. I want to thank those of you who have made some donations to this free Zoom class. I don't always have enough information from the system to respond to you personally and thank you personally. But I am aware of the names of the people that are donating, and trust me, I very much appreciate it. All you have to do is go to michaelbenner.com and click on the Zoom page, and there's an intro video and a bio, and at the very top upper left above the video is a donate button. But the class is free and always free, and if that's difficult for you, no problem. We're happy that you're here in any event. But I wanted to acknowledge that. Give us a review in our podcast if you get a chance. Apple Podcast has reviews, and also Podchaser has reviews. But we're on all podcast players, apps, and directories. And same with the YouTube video. If you can subscribe and like and comment, we'd appreciate that too. So let's do our opening med. What do you say? Our opening meditation, and then we'll talk a little about critical thinking. Some real valuable little tips or bullet points for you. So get comfortable in your chair or your meditation pillow, whether you're sitting up straight or in a yoga position. If you're in a chair or furniture, put your feet flat on the floor. And just as you close your eyes, bring your awareness into your body and feel yourself in your body. Become aware of your feet and your legs. Become aware of your torso and your shoulders and your head. And think of yourself as being aligned and balanced, centered. And let's take 3 or 4 nice, slow, deep breaths to begin the relaxing. As you inhale, pull in strength and power. Hold for just a beat as you peak, and then exhale just as slowly, beyond where you'd normally stop, all the way out. Wait for just a beat, and start a second cycle, pulling in through the nostrils, ideally, and exhaling through the nose or the mouth, all the way. As you inhale, you pull in strength and power. And as you exhale, you feel a letting go. A release of breath, a release of muscular tension, a release of worries and doubts and confusion. Let it all go. One more time. Muscles relaxing and unwinding as you exhale. And then breathe normally. And again, check in with your body, sort of scan your body or slowly sweep from head to toe, and then back again. Letting go of any remaining muscular tension. And imagining arteries and veins and capillaries dilating ever so slightly, so that there's less resistance to the flow of blood in your body. And there's less resistance to the flow of energy in your body. And all of your organs do a better job and become more efficient. A better job with less effort. As you allow yourself to feel safe and relaxed. Safe and relaxed. In the present moment. Let go of your concerns, your worries, and your regrets about the past. Similarly, release your concern about the future, what may be coming up, so that you can sit in the only thing that's real, the unfolding of the present moment. And consider the freshness and the newness of the present moment as it unfolds before you. As if every moment is a beginning, part of an ongoing, eternal, and infinite creation. And while this present moment has no past and no future, it continues to unfold before you. Watch your breath from the bottom of your nose. Watch your body breathing itself all by itself. And most importantly, tell yourself silently and internally that you are the watcher, not the breather. Your body breathes itself all by itself. It always breathes in the present moment. By simply watching your breath for a few minutes, accounting for the inevitability of distraction, making your goal to be aware of your mental drift as soon as it happens, getting better and better at recognizing when the mind sneaks off the goal of breath watching. Your goal is not to concentrate, never be distracted, but to catch yourself as soon as possible. Say to yourself, of course, the mind drifts. This is what it does. And then bring your awareness back to the breathing. Do this for 3 minutes while I remain silent and until you hear my voice again. Simply watch your breath. Say to yourself, I am the watcher. The witness, the observer. And as I learn to watch my breath and not be the breather, I can learn to watch my thinking and not be the thinker. When I think, I am more than the thinker. I have volition and free will. My thoughts can be true. They can also be false. And most likely, somewhere in between. And that's okay. It's just fine. Just as we hold our bodies too tightly, we hold our thinking too tightly as if it were a weapon, as if thoughts were necessary to understanding. Consider how many times in your life, particularly recently, that an understanding has come to you full blown, bursting into your awareness without any train of thoughts or stream of logic. Many, if not most, of our greatest realizations and insights come in this way, bursting into awareness, as if already thought out on some plane. And having reached a certain stage of completion, are presented to your awareness. As if these were insights, realizations that you understood all along, but just were not aware of. And by sitting safe and relaxed, patiently, not as the thinker, but as the observer, the light comes and you see the bigger picture. And you recognize what's really going on here. So too, we can observe our emotional feelings from a place of non-attachment. We can see them on the horizon while they're still small. Imagine being so aware that the subtlest disturbance catches your attention. You're aware of your irritation or your frustration or your anger. Well, it's still far away on the horizon, coming toward you, but it's still at a distance and much easier to work with, to look at, to identify, to either recognize or inquire about internally in your mind from a safe, quiet, peaceful place, free from turmoil, free from the disturbance of a big feeling coming upon you only when it's overwhelming because you were busy, focused out into the world, trying to keep all the balls in the air or all the plates spinning. So the emotions creep up on you. So emotions are much easier to manage when we come from a safe and relaxed place of non-attachment. This is why we watch the breath. To acknowledge that the body breathes itself and you're not simply the breather. I don't think we could exist. I mean, what would happen during sleep if we had to monitor every breath, if every breath had to be deliberate? Life depends upon this autonomic nervous system. We don't have to decide to beat the heart or digest food. We don't have to regulate the immune system. But merely recognize that stress and anxiety and tension, feeling like an effect of a life that's done to you, triggers a tendency to struggle with everything, to make everything a struggle. What if you just put all that down and practiced watching? You would understand more, understand it sooner, understand it more completely, and manage it before it became overwhelming. You see? I am the watcher. I am the witness. Rather than moving out through life, consider that life moves through you. Sitting on the riverbank, watching the river flow. Sitting in a train station, watching the trains come and go. And just because a train comes into the station doesn't mean you need to get on board and follow those thoughts or feel impacted by huge, overwhelming feelings. You could just sit. to realize, to see into insight, to see more clearly, more deeply. Looking into a pool of water, a small lake or a pond, from a dock or a boat. Only when that water is calm and smooth as glass are you able to see deeply. As well as recognize what's reflected on the surface from above you. But the more disturbed the water, the less likely we are to see either into the water or that which is reflected on the surface. Learning to sit safe and relaxed for 15 minutes a day will change your life in extraordinary ways. And there's no wrong way to do it. There are better ways which you will learn and discover. But there are no wasted moments in meditation. It's about seeing clearly and deeply. To become aware of that which exists, though often we're unaware of it. Prepare to come back to the wide awake state simply by forming the intention to feel a gentle floating up, like waking up in the morning, like a scuba diver rising slowly toward the surface. And 3, eyes open, wide awake, better than before, back in the room, feeling fine, rested, refreshed, better than before. Nice big breath, take a big breath. And stretch as you exhale. Wide awake, feeling great. Alrighty. Thank you for that. I hope that makes sense to you, this idea of non-attachment. I run into so many meditations that are about mindfulness or vipassana, sometimes called insight meditation, that don't really seem to emphasize the point here of non-attachment. What's that about, to be non-attached? And it's to step back or to rise up and from that elevated perspective, see the bigger picture, the gestalt, the whole enchilada. Like, again, that feeling of insight and inspiration, revelation, epiphany, that, oh my God, I see what's going on here. I guess we all know the story of the 5 blind men describing the elephant. Well, imagine that a person is not blind and that they're standing back far enough that they can see the whole elephant. And then maybe rise up and see it from above and from the front, the back, the sides. Oh, that's an elephant. Then you watch it behave. You watch it with the other elephants. How do we zoom out? How do we pull back? How do we rise up? How do we get that bigger picture? Relaxation. That's what meditation is. So when we open our eyes and move out into a stressful world, struggling against what seems to be done to us by others, completely beyond our control, largely beyond our influence, we get stressed and our vision narrows, don't you see? There's a whole brain process that goes with that. The amygdala hijack. Higher brain functions are shut down in order to prepare you for battling the danger or the likelihood of danger, whatever it is that may be hiding in the confusion and the stress of that which you don't fully understand. And again, that's what anxiety and stress and fear are. It's not a danger necessarily. It's just that you don't know. it's the not knowing that causes the stress and the anxiety. And so when we most need these higher brain functions, they become least available to us, right? And we become cavemen. And that really leads us to our topic today. I want to begin to talk about critical thinking, and I'll share this bullet point document I have with you on screen in a moment. I want to begin by talking about conspiracy theories. Now, there have always been conspiracy theories even before we had the internet and computers and algorithms that I don't know that people fully understand how these algorithms work. If you ever get an opportunity sitting with a friend and you both have computers or iPhones or whatever that you can access the internet, if both of you Google the same term, notice that you get different Google results. Why would that be? Because they know you. They've been watching you. They're recording all of your habits and dispositions and interests and fears, and they're giving you more of what you have wanted in the past. So occasionally I will receive these links in emails from friends or postings that I get, Facebook Messenger or chat or email or whatever. And there'll be a link to something so bizarre and off the wall and totally paranoid, schizophrenic nonsense. And I wonder, where are you getting this stuff? I don't see this stuff on my feed, right? It's because we all have our own algorithms, personally designed. So if you're concerned about 5G killing the honeybees, next thing you know, you get an article about 5G causing cancer. And then you get an article that says it's in the vaccine. And there are these nano microchips in the vaccine that are going to affect your DNA and turn you into some sort of monster, some sort of democratic robot or something. I don't know, some nonsense. And then we end up with Democrats eating babies, and John Kennedy is going to rise from his grave and run with Trump. And it's just like so absurd to any reasonable thinking person, and yet there are millions of people that suck this up. There were thousands of people in Dallas one day because John Kennedy was supposed to rise from his grave. People came from all over America in the car believing John Kennedy. How is this possible? And you say, well, these people aren't very smart. Well, in many cases they are. You might think, well, then they're cruel and nasty, and they're looking for cruel and nasty stuff. No, we all have that ability or capability, but Often victims of conspiracy theories are very nice people, and if you didn't get on the topic, and you get along with them just fine, you know. And so what is this? A lot of it is explainable with a term that Stephen Colbert coined about 15 years ago when he was doing the old show, before he took over for Letterman. He coined a term called truthiness, which is brilliant. Truthiness, as he defined it, is I know it's true because it feels like it ought to be. What brilliant insight. So many people believe what they believe because of cognitive dissonance. People who know the federal election, the national election, that Joe Biden, who's been in politics all of his life, 45, 50 years or something, he had 8 million more votes than Trump, but so many Trump people really believe the election must have been stolen in spite of any evidence at all. And all of the recounts and even Republican-led recounts that were unofficial and off the book in Arizona, they had to admit, yeah, Biden won. And that didn't persuade any of these people, right? They live in a bubble. They just can't believe that their guy didn't win because the belief was based not on critical thinking, but on emotions. They believe what they believe because that's the way they feel, because it makes them feel wonderful, or it terrifies the bejesus out of them, or some combination of strong feelings, yin or yang. I know it's true because it feels like it ought to be. There's no critical thinking in that. If you remember, 6 or 8 weeks ago, we did a couple of classes, 2 or 3 in a row, about the distinctions between thoughts and feelings. And just as a simple place to land with this, your emotions tell you about you. They're subjective intelligence. And even though stimulated by other individuals or groups or conditions or events, stimulated by externals, the emotion is still your personal response. If that nasty, indecent person had said that same hurtful thing to 10 people, each of them would have responded in a slightly different way and been triggered and reminded of times in their past which are unique, and so everybody's going to respond differently. So the emotion is the response. It's yours. This is huge. And most people in this day and age will live, grow old, and die and never figure this out. They will continue to obsess, because of this amygdala hijack largely, on the stimulus, as if you made me mad. I'm mad because you made me mad. You should have known that I was going to call off and hit you. A friend of mine was in a business meeting, and this guy hauled off and cold-cocked one of the guys in the business meeting, just punched him right in the face. And the next time they got together to mitigate and resolve to mediate the dispute, this guy said, well, he knows I'm a violent guy. It's his fault because he knew I was a violent guy, and I probably would have hit him. I mean, a complete lack of responsibility or ownership. He should have known that I was going to hit him. I'm a violent guy, unapologetic for it. So even if we don't express our violence physically, there's a lot of violence in the way we get triggered by others, and emotions are so contagious, aren't they? Just remarkably contagious. If somebody walks into a room, or you walk into a room where people are laughing, you immediately start giggling and chuckling and, hey, what's going on? What's so funny here? or if you happen upon an argument or a disagreement, even if it doesn't involve you, you can feel the tension in the air, can you not? There's a heaviness on your body that you can't actually feel. And then if you get involved and somebody gets angry at you, you're going to respond most likely with anger. And if they get sympathetic and say, that's okay, I understand, then you get sympathetic. Somebody forgives you, then you forgive them. So contagious. But the whole issue is compounded by the fact that the vast majority of people do not own their emotional feelings and have a problem distinguishing how I feel from what I think. And while thinking is not necessary to living, feeling is more of a portal to growth. It is an imperative in getting along in the world. There are times when you have to think, and clearly it's in your interest to think clearly, to solve a problem, to make a decision. When I say thinking is not necessary to living, it's not something you need to do all the time. And if you're always thinking and always solving a problem, you're working the program too hard. More meditation, more sitting back, more just watching. Watch your pets, your cats and your dogs. What do they do all day? They watch. Well, how boring. Are my cats and dogs bored because they just sit and watch? Well, how much time do we spend sitting and watching the television? And if you can watch a bad movie for 2 hours, then why couldn't you just sit on the back porch and watch the sky for 2 hours and the birds and the butterflies and the bees and feel the wind in your hair and smell the fragrances carried upon those gentle breezes and watch the way the light plays through the trees and off the distant mountains or whatever, just to wake up and slow down. You know, they used to say, stop and smell the roses, slow down. What's your hurry? The way people drive on the freeway, we often hear people say, well, they must be trying to get to someplace. And it always occurred to me they're trying to get away from someplace. I think the reason people speed on the freeway is they're running away. But that's just my take on it. I don't mean to use it too broad of a brush. So we need to understand that our emotions are subjective. They're about us, the one who feels the emotion. You're not going to discern an objective truth. You're not going to get from understanding what your emotions say about you from thinking critically about yourself. So just as emotions don't tell you very much about the world or even who stimulated your feelings, but an enormous amount about yourself, your thoughts don't really tell you much about yourself. Why judge yourself? It's full of criticism and self-loathing and fears of inadequacy. And that's not what thoughts are for. Thoughts are not for knowing yourself. Emotions are more for knowing yourself and the awareness beneath it all. More precisely, thoughts are for knowing the world around you. That's why the only thing we're taught to do in school is think. And even then, to think logically and critically, but not intuitively. Critical thinking really embraces intuition. True critical thinking is not only logical, it's also intuitive. These are the two ways we think. Logic is general to specific. It's taking something that is known and breaking it down into pieces. The way you balance a checkbook, the way you We mentioned this a couple of months ago. The way you order from a restaurant, by eliminating, you look at a menu and you eliminate what you don't want to arrive at two or three choices, and then you just choose one of those intuitively. My wife and one of her daughters and my sister are all into Wordle, and Doreen was showing me Wordle the other day, and I was thinking, what a perfect example of deductive and inductive thinking. I don't know if you're familiar with the game, but you have to choose a five-letter word, and then the computer game tells you if any of the letters are in the word and whether they're in the right place. So you start with a word with a lot of vowels in it, right? And maybe you don't get any of them, let's say. Well, you say, well, gosh, my word had an A and an I in it, and they're not in there. So what have I got? Just A, let's see, I have E, O, U, right? Sometimes Y. So that's deductive logic. But then you choose a new word. Where's that come from? That's inductive logic. Well, let's see. And you roll your eyeballs up in your head and you look at the sky as if that's where the answer is. And you're looking for a new word. And that's specific to general. It's like I have these observed details and I'm trying to figure out the word. What's the big picture? So I thought, God, what a fine example of both, of the deductive logic of breaking things down from general to specific, and the inductive logic of looking at what I do know and inducing some larger overarching concept here, some greater understanding. In this case, what's the word that solves the puzzle for the day today? So let me bring up, give me a second here, let me bring up a screen share. And I believe this should do it. Mindy, can you unmute and tell me if that looks right?
Looks perfect.
Awesome. And you can see the whole page, Mindy?
Yes, I can. All the way down, both groups of 8.
Perfect. Okay. This is not mine. This is something that I pulled from some work by Richard Paul, and his assistant and co-worker in this is Linda Elder. Richard Paul is one of the best known writers on the topic of critical thinking, and I've got to tell you before you run out and buy one or more of his books, they are pithy. They are really weighty and college level, grad school level stuff. So what we have here, I mean, I'm admitting I find his stuff like very difficult to read. So fortunately, there are some breakouts, and that's what I put together here today for you that I think are really valuable, and especially this first 8. The second 8 we'll talk about in a minute have to do with the nature of reasoning and logic and bullet points about how do we know if something is logical. But the first 8 are matters, as you can see, of self-inquiry. And let's read through them and just talk about them briefly here. The first bullet point of self-inquiry and critical thinking is what we've just been talking about. Are you thinking from general to specific, which is deductive? We see the word parts in colon, in, what am I saying, not colons, parentheses. In other words, breaking wholes into parts. Or is our thinking specific to general, which are whole concepts? And this is intuitive logic, which is really difficult to talk about, but it also includes intuition. Um, Inductive logic, deductive logic and inductive logic. Deductive is general to specific, breaking holes into parts. Inductive logic is the opposite, to complement, specific to general. But how do you do that? It's a projection. It's a supposition. If this is true and this is true, then that's probably true. The problem is you have to have a large set of data to draw upon for inductive logic to be of any value. We talked about this a few months ago. I won't dwell on it, but the idea all crows are black. How do you know? Well, every crow I've ever seen is black, so therefore all crows must be black. That's inductive logic. But how many crows have you seen? Oh, I don't know, half a dozen, maybe 20 crows in my whole life. Well, that's anecdotal evidence. And so that's the weakness of inductive logic. But if you study, if you dedicate your life to studying crows, and you've read every other book written by other experts on crows, and nobody's ever found a crow that's not black, well, then it's increasingly safe to say all crows are black. Until I find an albino crow or a brown one, all crows are black. You're larger the set that you're extrapolating from, the safer you are in making the claim. That does not mean that all blackbirds are crows, however. So this is the problem with that kind of logic. You got to be very careful. Deductive we have down. That's easy. It's just, what are your choices? Eliminate what you don't want. Select from what's left, like ordering off a menu or balancing your checking account. Subtract the checks you've written to see what your new balance is. Algebra is ultimately deductive. Solving for x equals. That's an inductive process or a deductive process. Intuition, on the other hand, is included in the idea of specific to general, right? If you close your eyes to promote intuition, what you might also think of as the source of your conscience, the part of you that knows right from wrong and good from bad and what you should do and what you shouldn't do. Conscience is part of intuition. But it knows more than right from wrong. It knows the right answers. And it will give you step-by-step approaches to things that you couldn't understand if just presented to you out of whole cloth. It's a wonderful talent, in that we could get to the 21st century and still not be teaching intuition in schools. It's shocking to me. But we're also not teaching awareness in schools. We teach concentration, but badly. Sports psychology, oddly, is beginning to change this whole thing, because the idea of visualizing, of knowing what you want, of standing open and receptive, of performance improving as you relax. Physical performance improves when you relax. So emotional awareness and mental performance, it seems, would also benefit from relaxation. Just not trying so damn hard, right? Just sit back, relax, let it occur to you. That's intuition. Let it come to you. That saying, trust your first impression? That's another very good tip. Provided you're relaxed. Now, if you're all stressed and tense and your eyes are open and blood pressure is peaking, you're not going to get those intuitive hits. Nobody ever had a great idea in the middle of an argument or while they were hurting emotionally. That's just, You might resolve that I've got to do this, or I guess I'm going to have to do that, or I don't have any choice but this. But you don't get these thunderous revelations, these insights when you're all amped up and full of angst and stress. It's when you're relaxed. It's when you're sitting on the patio or taking a shower or walking the dog. That's where you get the great ideas and the insights. Right? So there's a great reason to meditate right there. That's why Vipassana, breath watching, is often called insight meditation. Okay, so be aware of the distinctions between logic and intuition. Second bullet point, does your thinking have a significant or realistic purpose? Ask yourself, why am I thinking this? This is such a beautiful form of self-inquiry. Consider all the things that we spend time thinking about. And again, I know it's hard to discern sometimes between how you feel and what you think. There is a ping pong game going back and forth here. Thought, generating feelings, stuck in the feelings, absorbed by the feelings. Think, feeling, think. You know what I'm saying, right? Again, we're just spinning our wheels. It's like a car stuck in the mud, or the snow and ice. You're not getting anywhere. You know the feeling. So take a breath and relax and ask yourself, first of all, why am I doing this? This particular train of thought. These thoughts that are upsetting me, or these hurtful feelings that are generating thoughts? What's the significance? What's the purpose? Is it real? Is there a reason that I'm doing this? Why am I doing this? That's such a handy tool. Number 3, are you trying to answer a question or solve a problem? Sometimes those overlap. Sometimes answering a question is solving a problem, but often they're very different things. Simply asking yourself, which of these am I doing? Is there a question I have in mind that I'm trying to find an answer to? Or is this really a problem for me that I need to find an answer to? What's my motive? Why am I doing this? Why am I thinking along these lines? By the way, any comments that you have, if you just put them in the chat box, Melinda will read them. We'll give you an opportunity to unmute and chat if you wish. But if you just put a question or a comment in the chat box, I'd really appreciate it. We'll go to that in just a few minutes. Number 4, what assumptions are your thoughts based on? Again, very valuable. Re-examine the assumption that forms the foundation of these thoughts. I mean, how many times do you find yourself saying, oh, wait a minute. Oh, well, that's very different. Maybe you're engaged in conversation with someone. Oh, I just assumed that what you were saying was, oh, I'm sorry. No, I've got this all wrong. I just wasted the last 15 minutes arguing something that I didn't fully understand because of my assumption. Right? And again, that's part of, not necessarily part of intuition, but it's part of inductive logic to make assumptions. So examine them. What are you assuming? What are you taking for granted? What's the given here that may need some re-examination? And wouldn't it be cool to have this list, these 8 points handy? So you could check yourself out. Number 5, do they include data, facts, experience, or opinions? I have in my book, Fearless Intelligence, a hierarchy of understanding that comes from business management, and it's called the DIKW hierarchy, or the DIKW pyramid. And at the base of the pyramid, the D stands for data. The next level is information as you move up the pyramid. Information is based on data, but it goes a little further, doesn't it? When you begin to organize the data, consider data as being similar to words, and information is sentences. You're starting to put your data into a form that informs you. So the data becomes information. The K in DIKW is knowledge. Now that data that led to information is becoming a knowledge base. So the words that became sentences are now paragraphs and chapters, right? DIK, data, information, leading to knowledge. Well, what could be higher than knowledge? Wisdom, which is the highest form of understanding. Knowledge is knowing what you know. Wisdom is an awareness of what you do not yet know. It includes what you know, but it goes beyond to what do I not understand. It's a quality of humility. Becoming wise makes you humble. Becoming humble adds to your wisdom. If you need to have the right answer, you're not going to be very good at understanding. To enhance understanding, give up the need to be right. And anytime you're engaged in an argument, put much more emphasis on listening to the person you disagree with and acknowledging what you're hearing from them, even if you don't agree. Whether you agree with them or not is irrelevant. Do you understand them? Can you acknowledge that and play it back to them? Gee, I hear that what you're arguing here, what you're saying is this and this and this. Is that right? Okay. That's a very powerful thing. I'd like to revisit that whole idea of understanding being superior than the need to be right. You don't need to be right. That's just ego nonsense. Part of the spiritual path is giving that up. Who cares if you're right? Only the ego cares. Do you understand? And just because you understand somebody doesn't mean you need to agree. Number 6, what's your particular point of view? POV is point of view. What's your particular point of view? What's your take on this? What's your angle? What does your experience bring you to that gives you unique and personal insight into whatever you're attempting to understand or figure out here? Account for that. Adjust for the fact that, well, I have a lot of experience here that other people don't have, though it is my experience, not theirs. Or you say to yourself, gosh, I must admit, I'm really out of my depth here. I don't really have any idea what's going on in this area. Number 7, are you aware of your inferences and interpretations? Inference and imply are complementary terms. You know, other people imply, but we infer. So an inference is what I presume or take from what I've heard or read or what I'm getting. And those are extensions or developments upon what's been offered to you. And sometimes we get those confused. And we may say to the person that we're having the discussion with or the argument, yeah, but you said, and they go, no, I didn't say that. Well, yes, you did. No, I didn't. I didn't say that. And if we look at it carefully, we see, oh, well, this is like the assumption before. I just inferred from what you said, yeah, well, that's not critical, isn't it, if you're not double checking your inferences and your interpretation? So ask, am I interpreting this right? Well, I'm inferring, maybe you're implying, let me ask, does this mean da-da-da-da, right? And number 8, are you aware of the implications and the consequences? Essential to critical thinking is what's going to happen? Where are we going with this? If I arrive at this decision and take this action, what are the consequences of that? And to think that through before you act is something that you need to be safe and relaxed in order to do. The more stressed, the more cranked, the more anxious and fearful we are, the less likely we are to consider the consequences. We react reflexively and then suffer the consequences that we had never anticipated. A very important part of critical thinking is to look ahead. And similarly, what are the implications of this? Where else can we take this? What does this touch upon? Now, that's pretty much what I wanted to show you. I'm going to read these others, just read them through because I think I want to go to the comments and questions that you have, and I think these are pretty self-explanatory. What he's saying here is you can recognize logic and all reasoning by these values. Logic, reasoning always has a purpose. What is my purpose? It's not just random thoughts. That's not critical thinking. Does it have a purpose? Is it an attempt to figure something out, to settle a question, or to solve a problem? Or is it just garbage and nonsense spinning around inside your head, a patchwork of crazy thoughts from all over the place? 3, logic or reasoning is always based on some assumptions. There has to be a premise or a presumption or an assumption made. But know that it's an assumption. It may not be factual. You may need to change your mind about it. Isn't that an interesting phrase? Change your mind. All reasoning is done from some point of view, right? You may think you're being completely unbiased and objective. That's virtually impossible. So own your point of view. Yeah, well, I feel strongly about this, or this is not that important to me, or acknowledge that. Reasoning is always based on data, information, and evidence. Data, information, and evidence. Memorize those 3. Okay? Logic, reasoning is always expressed through and shaped by concepts and ideas. Number 7, contains information by which we draw conclusions and give meaning to data. Logic always contains inferences that allow us to draw conclusions and give meaning to data. And finally, lead somewhere has implications and consequences, as we discussed before. Number 8 in the first list, are you aware of the implications and consequences, is also number 8 on the second list. Logic leads somewhere to some implication or consequence. Okay? So that's just a few bullet points to help you be a better critical thinker, to examine your thought process, to I'll say it this way, rather than think about thinking, to observe yourself thinking. That's a very different thing than thinking about thinking, isn't it? Because when we're lost in our thoughts and we think about thinking, that leads to it's like it reminds me of when I'd get my fishing line all tangled up and spend an hour and a half trying to untangle the fishing line. Thinking about thinking about thinking about thinking about thinking about thinking about thinking, and it's just a ball of confusion. It leads to more stress, less critical thinking, and kind of madness, actually. And often a feeling that we don't even have any control over our thought process. But to be aware of ourselves thinking, to be aware of the thought process, to take a breath, let go, relax, step back, and watch your mind think. And don't be the thinker, but be the watcher, be the awareness of the mind thinking. This is so, I implore you to consider this. I am not the thinker, I'm the awareness of my thought. You're also not your feelings, and you're not your behavior, and you're clearly not what's done to you, and you're not your body, and we're more than all of that. We are that, but we're so much more, and in a very fundamental way, we are the awareness. We just got to keep, we can say, oh, we're all one, and reality is an illusion, and there's so many different ways to try to take our sense of self as an individual and seek or aspire to understand ourselves as part of the oneness of all things. But maybe a better way to go about it is to know that you are the one peeking out through your awareness. And to be the observer rather than the thinker, the feeler, the doer, the one that's been done to, to identify as the awareness. That in the literature is called I am, or in Hinduism and Sanskrit, Tisvat Asi. Thou art that. I am that. There's nothing here that you are not, but that's really difficult to comprehend. The brain's job is to make us believe that we're separate. And it does a fine job of that, doesn't it? So, critical thinking, that's all. What do you think about that? Anybody have any comments or questions that we can develop for you? Shared experiences about what it's like to get confused and lost in thought, try to figure things out. Melinda?
No comments yet. I was just talking to you earlier about my quandary of trying to figure out a problem I had with my yard. And it wasn't until you touched on a more of an emotional topic that I realized my logic about solving my domestic problem was heavily clouded by my emotions, and they didn't have anything to do with the current garden problem. They went way back, but for the life of me, I wouldn't have seen that until somehow I talked to you. There's something about the process of stopping. It's kind of magical to all of a sudden get a revelation of my own internal emotions and experiences are preventing me from seeing clearly the present moment. And I think that's what happens with a lot of people with the with the crazy conspiracy theories, is something grabs them as appealing, whether they'll see their loved one again in heaven if they follow a religious doctrine, or the country will be restored to normalcy if they back a certain person. It seems we're fundamentally wired to not be able to let go of that. And really only through working with the breathing that I've gotten any ability to do that, really.
Well, what that reminds me of, what that brings up for me, is the reflexive nature. You used the phrase letting go. Well, letting go of what? What are we holding on to? Everything. Holding on is a fear response. And fear is not about danger, as you know. It's about things that are confusing and unknown, or which we're unaware of. It's the potential that there may be some fear hidden in your confusion that causes us to feel anxious or nervous or apprehensive or worried. It's just the not knowing. So, because we don't know something in this situation or that situation, something is confusing us. Somebody said something, they made an assertion that upsets us. We immediately react reflexively and start holding on. And when you're holding on, it's hard to let go. It's hard to move on. It shatters awareness. It makes it really difficult to understand. Those big pictures, those ahas just don't happen when you're holding on. So letting go is, it has to be initiated. It has to be a deliberate, oh, I'm holding on. It's making me increasingly dense. I'm not getting it here. In fact, I'm starting to get triggered and angry and hurting, and I want to yell, I want to hit something, or maybe I want to cry. You take a breath and let go, and that returns the nation to normal and the world to normal. And that's where our genius is hidden, and that's where our spiritual identity can be found, in always letting go. Love is letting go. Fear is holding on. Love is letting go of fear. Fear is the belief we need to hold on to love, but love is everywhere. See if you can follow this. Love is everywhere, equally present. It's consciousness. It's the air. It's everywhere, right? So why would you need to hold on to it? Why would you need to carry it? Any more than a fish would need to carry water to its destination to make sure it'll be wet there. Fish's destination will always be wet by nature of the fact that it's a fish. You will always be immersed in love, surrounded by it. It's everywhere, which is consciousness, which is awareness. Capital L love, not emotional love, but the light, the insight, the understanding. Holding on diminishes that. Letting go opens us to it time and time and time. And whenever you don't know what to do, here's what to do. Take a breath, and as you exhale, let go. Whenever you don't know what to do, that's what to do. Let go. And instead, the tendency is, when I don't know what to do, I work harder at trying to figure out what I do and what I should do, what I ought to do. Well, what do you want me to do about it? And then we think more and encounter more that's unknown. And now I'm even more confused. And now I'm even holding on tighter and more, shutting down all those higher brain functions. It's so simple. It's so easy. We could be teaching this in kindergarten so that by the third or fourth grade, by the time you're 9 or 10 years old at least, we understand the value of expanding awareness by relaxing, by breathing, by letting go, by seeing ourselves as a fountain of life rather than a victim or a target of what's done to us. If I could wave a magic wand with regard to public education and make one change in the school system everywhere, that would be it. To teach self-awareness. What a, what a crazy thing that we got to this point and we're not yet teaching our children to be self-aware. How could it be simpler?
Yet it seems counterintuitive to arrive at a real logical problem by by letting go of it. Anne has a comment on that.
Thank you. When you're referring to letting go, for me, letting go is letting go of control of the situation. And you just made a comment about waving a magic wand, and that is so relevant because I've said so many times over the last year, I've got a situation in my life that I always say, if I could just wave a magic wand and change this. But the thing is, the magic wand would change something that's out of my control because it's another person, it's another person's choice. And in order for me to need to let go of the fact that I can't always be in control of things and I shouldn't always be in control of things. And I need to accept what's happening rather than and learn to understand it better and communicate it better rather than try to change it and try to, as you said before, prove myself right. And like I said, for me, it's all about letting go of control.
And that's so well said. And also, what do we mean by control? I mean, there is self-control, and then attempting to control other people. So even if we look only at what we mean by self-control, there's a great deal in our lives. I mean, if we were hermits, isolated, living alone in a mountain, and the only thing we're interested in is self-control. There's nobody else here. And we're not interested in controlling the weather or the animals. I still have issues around self-control. There's aspects of my body that I have very little influence over. I can choose not to breathe for a short period of time, but eventually the body rises up and overwhelms me and forces me to breathe. And I can raise or lower my blood pressure, but only within limits. And pulse and the body's immune system, we can influence that with the mind, with relaxation and letting go. We get more control, but there still are limits, right? So maybe we could say, I'm learning to be in control of the limits on my ability to be in control. It's an interesting word, control. The alternative, as you said rightly, is accept. And I think we all know the wisdom prayer about accepting what we cannot change and the courage to change what we can, but we could use control there, the serenity to accept what we cannot control instead of change, and the courage to change or control what we can control. But then that third phrase of the wisdom prayer is, and the wisdom to know the difference. So there's the rub. How do I continually monitor the extent of my influence? And one of the greatest challenges I've found in my life is accepting the limits of my influence, accepting the limits of my control. So, yeah, the magic wand is sort of a fantasy. We all want to fix the world, and if only we had a magic wand to do that. But to accept that there's only so much we can do, even when it comes to self-control and living our own lives. Wouldn't we all love to slow aging, right? There are things we can do to slow aging, but we will still age. It's inevitable. Or we get in a situation that we wish will never change. This is perfect. This is ideal. I hope this never changes. Well, it will. So it's a balance between influence and control on one hand and accepting on the other hand. Accepting that which we can't control. So someone you love, for example, is on a self-destructive path, and because you care about them and you love them, you attempt to intervene, and you try everything. You appeal to them, you implore them, you beg and plead, maybe ultimatums, maybe tough love, maybe you threaten them, and then you fall back to a softer position. But at the end of the day, you may just have to accept that I'm not giving up on this person. I will always love them. I will always care about them. But I'm at the limits of what I can do. I've just got to accept I have very little control over that which is outside of me. Acceptance is falling back on a discernment of what I can control and influence and what I just have to accept. So be it.
Patrick has a comment too.
Thank you, Ann. Hello, Patrick.
Hey, Michael. Thank you, Melinda. Boy, I found the rest area just in time. So, a couple things. Observing your thoughts. I have a really good friend. He's older, has some wisdom behind him. He's the only one that's ever talked to me about learning how to observe my thoughts and using those words. And so I've been learning about it and consciously trying to understand what that means for the past year. And it's really coming together. And when you said the same words, boy, it just hit the bell, And I think the answer to your thing about the education, about the meditation, is when I try to describe to people how I found you on KLOS, the first thing that I can remember that ever really just blew my mind was you had a caller and you wanted to know why NBC wasn't reporting on the fraud from General Dynamics on the American taxpayers. And you mentioned, you told him, you said, listen, NBC and General Dynamics is owned by the same company, Coca-Cola. I might have the companies wrong, but that was the point. So NBC is not going to report on General Dynamics. And I was like, oh my God, this is, I never heard something like that. And it's just glued on to, every show that I could ever listen to after that. And so I think that's why they'll never be allowed to really teach accounting, what credit card debt and finance really means, because they want you to go through all that to pay them to learn as an adult in the real world. So, meditation just would be a hindrance to the mind control of the public.
It was during those 10 years, Patrick, from 1977 to 1987, boy, it was a long time ago. I was 1977. When I started at KLOS, I was 29 years old. And I worked there until I was 40. So just a little over 10 years. And it was during that time, and people who listened to that radio show, and I also did a show on the opposite side of the hall, the KABC as well for a while, but most people know me from the FM side. It was doing that show for those 10 years that I realized that my concern about politics and government and working for peace and justice and changing the world was never going to be as effective as it could be if I didn't back up and see how all things are a reflection of consciousness and awareness. That our consciousness, our awareness, and those are really the best words, understanding, maybe, consciousness and awareness and understanding, insight, that which we grok, that which we see, that which we care about. There's ethics involved in being conscientious, being aware of our conscience and our consciousness. Accounts for everything in the world. And so if we want to change things, you can't just point a gun at somebody and say, do what I tell you to do. We can't threaten them. We can't I mean, we have to, protest and boycott and most importantly, vote and educate ourselves and encourage others to do all of these things. But raising consciousness is the most radical, subversive, fundamental thing that any of us could do, because we're in the image of the very life force that created this whole reality. We are that. Visvat Asi. Thou art that. The creator. We're creating. So instead of manipulating the effect out here, we need to go into the mind and the heart and change the movie that's racked up on the projector here. Change the way we look at things, the way we perceive things, the way we respond to things, to elevate the consciousness. Then everything flows from that. And that's when I started doing my classes in the early 80s and teaching meditation and teaching people to raise their consciousness. And I'm still concerned about the politics and the environment and the gross injustice and the insane inhumanity of hundreds of thousands, millions of Americans homeless, of 1 in 5 children being food insecure in the richest nation in the world, $780 billion on war, and yet our bridges are falling into the river. And again, we can't get decent health care, and it just goes on and on and on. But to back up, to let go of all of the effect and look at the ultimate cause, it comes back to consciousness or awareness. And when we are aware of our thoughts and aware of our feelings, not just the thinker or the emotionally driven person, but to breathe, relax, stand back, and just watch those thoughts and learn the patterns and the biases and the presuppositions and the damage that we've been through and the way we're triggered is a form of liberation that is difficult to explain. It's an ineffable liberation. It's so freeing. Even if only to say, I don't have to be a know-it-all. I don't have to have all the answers. Again, a talk show guy could be really tempted, and you hear them even today on hate radio, to have all the answers. Why would you want to have all the answers? What a horrible position to take. How about being the question person? Being the one who wonders. A wonderful life is filled with wonder. So wonder. Be curious. Want to know. Again, understanding is so superior to the silly need to be right. I'm afraid that's about all the time we have. Patrick, thank you. Do you have anything real quick to follow up on that?
No, I
Man,
think- oh, I'm sorry. I have nothing. You go ahead, Patrick.
Patrick,
good stuff. Thank you, Michael.
you're welcome. Thank you. Drive safe or safely. Mindy, any loose ends?
No, I think you wrapped it all up. Thank you very much. That was a nice meditation too.
Good. And you're feeling better about your issue of the day?
Yeah, you fixed it. Of course, the problem was me, but we knew that.
Good. Well, give yourself a big hug.
Thank you.
I hope you people all know that there is such a thing as hugging yourself. You just close your eyes and relax and feel like you have a thunder shirt on. You know, those things they make for animals. Make them feel all safe and secure. Give yourself one of those nice warm hugs. Remember how it feels to be hugged and held by someone who cares for you and loves you. Let that be you. Hug yourself, care for yourself, love yourself. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. I'd like to invite you to, each and every one of you, to unmute and just shout a howdy do or a so long or a goodbye to everybody. And I will say namaste, aloha, and salam. Join us next week in Again, thank you so much for being here. Peace and love.
Thank
Shanti.
you, Michael, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.